understand what's the relevance of a personal practice to being a teacher. And we're also going to explore spirituality as a journey, as a personal journey. And we're going to look at some practical tools, obstacles, and support for practice. I hope you all have some kind of journal, because I will put you to do a few short journal exercises during this workshop. Okay, so, having a personal practice, and by this I mean a personal practice of spirituality, not just to remain on the intellectual level is a nice idea, no, but something that you actually can work with and put into your life day to day and help to transform your energy, no? Because it's more than just wanting, it's something you have to work with, it's an inner work. And I see this as a part of the inner secret of Neohumanist education. And that Neohumanist education isn't just, we were talking about this morning, it's not just, throw in some ecology, throw in some yoga, throw in some inclusion, and then stir it all up and you've got Neohumanist education. There's something subtle that makes it Neohumanist education, and part of that is who you are. It's what you bring into the educational process as a person. It's your own inner journey, what's going on inside of you, seeing the direct connection of that to your educational process. Now, good teachers in any system, I think, know this intuitively, and that is part of what makes them a great teacher. But in Neohumanist education, we consciously look at and cultivate this aspect. Good teachers all over the world and in many different disciplines, if they're a really great teacher, usually they're able to transmit some type of enthusiasm for the subject matter because they feel that enthusiasm, because they're living that enthusiasm. And so when they've got that spark of joy, it's contagious, yeah? And this is part of what really makes the Neohumanist education system alive. I was explaining also, so for those of you who heard it this morning, it'll be just a review, but in our system, the founder, P.R. Sarkar, when he created an institution to help guide Neohumanist education, he called it Gurukul. And there's some significance in my mind to that term, because it's a term from ancient India, and it's pre-Western education, the concept of education that came about. Our current form of education as being in institutions and so forth came along in the Industrial Revolution. And it was a sort of industrialization of educational process, a centralization of it. But in other cultures and in Eastern culture, the importance or the emphasis of education was that first children were sent at a certain age to go live in an ashram, to go live in the house with their guru. And that education was more of a practical life and moral, spiritual education, where they learned just by being in proximity to an elevated personality. And that contact with spiritual elevation is something that brings people up. You were talking about how if you go into a bar and you're the only person, you can't raise up the whole group, no? But if you're one-to-one, and especially if you've got somebody who's subtle, refined, developed, and they can bring along minds with them. And especially because this was an education system that was done very personally. A few children in the house. It wasn't like, necessarily hundreds and hundreds of kids staying in the house. So I think that this is something to think about, because we're not going to go back in time to that age, but what can we bring of that spirit of the Gurukul into our experience of being teachers? So it is a challenge to bring more of your person, yourself, your beingness into the act of teaching. And that part of that is being on some type of path of self-development and of personal exploration and growth, and really valuing your own journey within. So, for you, just wanted to put out the question, kind of, what is spirituality for you? What do you think of as being spiritual? What are spiritual qualities? Anyone? Is it the same as religious? No. Okay, so you could be very spiritual and not very religious. You could be very religious and not very spiritual. Or you could be very spiritual and very religious. Now, these things are not necessarily correlated. They could be, but they're not necessarily. I do think, I'll just briefly touch on this, I do think that religions do form an important function in cultures. They provide a sort of social glue. They create traditions, they create a passage of values, from the past to the current generations. They create celebrations around, add interest and celebration into life of different life moments and of different moments in the year and things like this. So there's a lot of things that, children and families and people can benefit from religions that is not necessarily the spiritual part of it, but it's purely a cultural side of the religion. You get a lot of people who maybe they go to their church or to their temple or something once a year for a particular festival, because it's part of being connected as a community. Spirituality, on the other hand, is different. And religion ideally should provide a context for spiritual growth, but it doesn't always work that way for everybody. But what spirituality is always going to be something very personal. It's a personal journey, it's a personal exploration. It might take you deeper into the tradition you were born with, or it might lead you in other directions. But it's a personal path of getting to get closer and closer to your divine entity, to your relationship with the divine, to your relationship with the greater whole, to give you that sense of purpose and place and connection in life. And then it expresses. You can see spirituality being expressed through different characteristics. Just call out to me, what do you think are some characteristics that you would expect to see in a spiritual person?
Compassion, love,
Yeah.
integrity.
Integrity.
Peace, harmony.
Peace and harmony. Confidence. Is that what you said?
Kindness.
Kindness.
Dynamic.
Thoughtfulness. Joy.
Sorry. Thoughtfulness and joy. Nice.
Passion.
Contentment. Passion. Contentment. Yeah, I like that also passionate idea of, a spiritual person, because it gives you lots of enthusiasm. It doesn't just make you passive.
That's why I said dynamic.
Yeah, you also said dynamic. Yeah. Yeah. Inspired.
Positivity, to be positive.
Positive. Yes, positive.
Did you say mindful?
No, but that's a good one. Yeah. Thoughtful was there. Somewhere in there. Yeah. So all of these qualities, basically we're talking about the higher human qualities. The more noble qualities of human beings. They get expressed when there's a spiritual journey going on. It brings it out of us. It's there in everybody. It's not just there in a few people. All of these qualities that you mentioned, they're in each and every one of you. And spirituality is a practical way to unfold them. So this is a quote from Anandamurti. When he was giving spiritual philosophy, he used his spiritual name, Anandamurti, and when he was giving social philosophy or educational philosophy, we used his regular birth name of P.R. Sarkar, but it's the same person. So spirituality is not a utopian ideal, but it's a practical philosophy which can be practiced and realized in day-to-day life, however mundane it be. Spirituality stands for evolution and elevation, and not for superstition and action or pessimism. So it's not like, we just are going to be spiritual because we're afraid we're going to die. or we're afraid of, something else. Spirituality, it's about elevation. And it's a practical way. How can we elevate? How can we go from dealing with our negativities and transform them into positivities? It doesn't just happen. No? It's not just automatic. If you look at the flow of water, in which direction does it flow most easily?
Down.
Down, it goes down easily. That's the natural flow of water. But can you make water go up?
Yeah. It's power.
Power. Yeah, pumps. Basically the idea, yes, water can go up, but it needs effort to go up. And our minds can easily flow down, but they have amazing capacities when they go up. And that to discover those capacities, to help them to flourish, we need to discover what that pump is and how to activate it and how to help our energy and our mind go up. well-known, the archetype of wisdom in our Western culture, Einstein said, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. Yeah. So everything related to intuition is almost treated as if it doesn't really exist. No, we're all so focused on, the things that can be measured and seen and that are material. And yet, the intuitive mind, as he says, is a sacred gift. It has so much more richness and so much more potential. And yet, what help have you received in your lives in a structured way to discover its potential and to unfold it? Did you learn anything in school about how to use your intuition? No. No, maybe you've done some workshops or something like this. Maybe in humanist education you start to get some support for that. But basically the society is not structured around helping us to discover the potentials of the intuition. Rather the opposite. In yoga, there's a famous metaphor of the banana and the skin. And knowledge, intellectual knowledge, is not seen as useless. Rationality and logic are not seen as being in contradiction with spirituality. Rather, if you look at this entire universe, everywhere you see order, everywhere you see intelligence and logic operating, why should spirituality be any different? It's not just something you have to believe, There is also an incredible amount of order and rationality, you can say, even in understanding the intuition and spirituality. But even that knowledge, even if it's knowledge that's knowledge about your spiritual philosophy, for example, it's still only the banana skin. And you don't eat the banana skin, right? You eat the banana. The banana's the sweet part. The banana's what you want to get to. And the banana represents love. It represents the experience of spiritual love. So, in the yogic approach to spirituality, theory is considered to be 1%, and practice is considered to be 99%. And here I'm going to tell you a story which is actually based on a real story of the Golden Buddha, which now sits in the temple of the Golden Buddha in Thailand. And so 300 years ago, this is a solid gold statue. You can imagine it's worth something like $300 million now in our day and age. But this was a solid gold statue, and it was sitting in this temple, and there was an invasion of the Burmese. And the Buddhist monks were, really distraught that this would be pillaged and defiled, in this invasion. And so to protect their statue, which had much more than a monetary value for them, but a sacred value, a spiritual value for them, they covered it in a layer of clay. They just put clay all over it, so that it would just appear to be a simple clay statue. And indeed, it worked. The statue was left untouched. However, the monks were killed or fled. And the villagers also fled or were killed. And so, hundreds of years went past, and nobody knew that there was a golden statue underneath the clay. And of course, the statue was revered and everything, but it was considered to be a clay statue. Until one day, because the government wanted to build a road, and so they needed to move the temple, and so they were lifting the statue. They were surprised to find it was so heavy, and to their horror, when they started to lift it with a crane, it started to crack. And so they put it down, and they thought, okay, the next day they'll come back with a bigger crane to move it. And in that evening, one of the monks went to cover it with a tarp to protect it from the rain, and he was using a flashlight, and he saw where the crack was, that there was something shining. You could see a beautiful golden color shining. And of course, you can imagine how not okay it is to start chipping away at a sacred artifact. But he dared to do that, just a little bit, to see what really was there. And then when he saw the gold, the next day they systematically went and they removed all this clay, and they discovered that underneath was this massive solid gold statue. So, we all have a golden Buddha inside. Culture has covered it with clay, sometimes. Or our past, or whatever has happened. Or just descending into a material body. We forget our spiritual nature, our spiritual origin at some point. But we have this golden Buddha inside. And sometimes it takes some type of experience, sometimes even a shocking experience, to create that kind of crack. So that you get the first glimpse that, there's something deeper inside. There's something beautiful inside. And then you have to have that courage, to systematically remove the clay and be able to express and rediscover and polish that gold. And so I think that spiritual practice is a practice of removing the clay. You get some inspiration, you get some hint, something happens in life which reveals to you that there is more than meets the eye. And then you do the work. You have to have the courage, because, like I said, it's not so okay, to just start chipping away. You might worry that you're going to do something wrong. But, when you do it, it's an amazing experience. And so, we're meant to discover our true nature. And that's what spirituality really is about. It's really about discovering that true nature, that true treasure inside. Our teacher said that, when people go around looking for happiness in the external world and ignoring the treasure of their inner heart, he said it's like a beggar who has been given, all this gold coins, and he throws it to the side and goes begging door to door for alms, for bread. And we're in this position. We forget what we have and we go looking for it outside. But the search is actually an internal one. However, when your mind is a volcano, how can you expect flowers to grow there? If our mind is really turbulent and full of anger or irritation or stress, and it becomes like a volcano, we don't yet have the fertile ground for flowers. However, post-volcanic ashes have fertilizer. So, okay. In spirituality, you don't actually have to reject anything, or suppress things. You have to learn how to channelize them. That's the whole secret, how to transform. And my favorite metaphor for how meditation works is to look at the sea. And to imagine the sea on a very rough day, a very windy, turbulent, stormy day. And then the surface of the sea, you can't see the bottom of the ocean. It's all turbulent, and you just see the reflections on the surface, right? But when it's peaceful, in the early morning when the sea tends to be very calm, or at sunset, it becomes clear, it becomes transparent, and you can see to the bottom of the sea easily. Now that bottom of the sea, it's always there, even during the stormy times, but you're not always aware of it. When you're able to quiet the waves, then you perceive what's really there. So this is what happens. That's what spiritual practice does. It's a systematic way, using even certain aspects of our biology, to be able to create this quietness and clarity so that we can perceive our true nature. We can perceive the golden Buddha within. It's always there. It's just our minds aren't able to perceive it. So we're not inventing something. We don't have to imagine it. It's really there. It's a question of perception, and it's a question of quietening the mind, so that we can have that perception. I also liken it sometimes to, there's so many vibrations that are invisible right now in this room. For example, wireless internet. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but if you have the right instrument, you can prove that it's there, and you can utilize it. In the same way, just because that supreme entity, we cannot see it, we cannot touch it, but it's all pervasive. It's the ultimate wireless. And yet, to receive that signal, we have a special instrument, and it's within our mind, but we have to tune it in correctly to be able to perceive that. And that's what the practices are about. They're about tuning in. The other classic metaphor is the idea of the drop of water and the great ocean. Both are made of the same substances. In our case, our microcosmic sense of consciousness is made of the same consciousness that great ocean of consciousness is. Only we're aware of our separateness. We're more dealing with the world through our intellect, which separates us. But if we were to go deeper and deeper into our intuition, we find that connecting point where our drop of water enters into that ocean, and there's no difference. We're just part of the ocean. We're one with the ocean. We're all one with that. So when we do meditation, I'd like to just give you the yogic definition of it. Some of you might have other practices, and that's okay. But as you're here in Humanist education, you have access to this practice. If you don't already have a practice, you have access to it. Or you can take what might be valuable for you and enhance it. We do encourage that every teacher is doing some type of serious practice, some type of serious daily practice where you're cultivating your inner life and you're cultivating your relationship to spirit, Because otherwise, how will we bring it to the children? How will we bring it into our teaching and into the school if we're not living it, if it's not a real thing, if we're not enthusiastic about it, if we don't connect to it in any way, then it won't be there. No, we won't. We'll be trying, but it'll be hard for it to have life. It'll feel a bit forced or artificial or something like this. But if we tap into our own sense of inspiration, our own inner life, then that's going to become rich and it's going to flower, just like everything else that you teach. So I see that actually in education, there's two aspects to this. When I said that we would look at the relevancy to teaching, one is to be able to give importance not just to the intellect, but also to the intuition. That our education isn't just an education of the intellect; it's also a deeper education of the intuition. Sometimes it's more like accessible to say an education of the heart, but it's deeper even just than the heart in terms of like human relationship, Because when you're connecting to spirit, then you see that in everything, and then your empathy and your circle of love, it expands so much wider, to embrace within it everything, not just people. And the other aspect of why it's relevant, and the other aspect of that is for teachers, there's a big difference between teaching only from your intellect and your planning and like this, and being able to really work from your intuition, to really be intuitive and spontaneous, and to have knowledge that comes to you from a deeper place, not only from here, but that comes from within. And the more that you do meditation or some type of spiritual practice and increase your connection to that intuitive, because meditation is a practice that exists on the intuitive level of the mind. And so the more that you're connecting, you make that channel clear. It just creates a pathway. It clears out the pathway so that you have more access to your intuition, and you can learn to trust it, and you can learn to live from that space, and not just from the intellect space that wants to know everything ahead and plan everything to the last detail. So that aspect enhances teaching, to be able to be more intuitive and to be able to, and to be able to bring that inspiration into everything that you do, so that inspiration will connect to the children and help them to have, through your modeling, to have, an idea about the intuition and spirituality. Not because you talk about it, but because you're exuding it. You're living it. You're living and breathing it into what you do. So I want to make a slight differentiation here. That the yogic interpretation of meditation can be slightly different than the common understanding of meditation that's currently in the pop culture understanding of meditation, which I find that often there's a bit of blurriness or confusion between definitions of of just relaxation and meditation. And a lot of times people also think that meditation means you just don't think about anything. So I have some people out here that, have heard this type of interpretation. Okay, so in a way, yes, because you want to not think of all of your surface level of your ocean. You want to perceive the deeper level, and to do that it has to be quiet. So it makes sense that you want to kind of detach from all of those thoughts. But it's much easier to direct the mind actively towards something than it is to stop it from doing something. All of you work with kids. You must have seen, if you tell them, don't do that, what do? They do that thing. So, using the no, don't do that, stop, like the negative on human mind just it's not really the most efficient strategy. When we use no, and whether it's with ourselves, if we say to ourselves, oh God, I shouldn't forget to take my keys today. I'm not going to forget to take my keys. I'm not going to forget them. And then you forget them. And you're like, but I knew I shouldn't forget them. And I told myself not to forget them. But why? Because we gave ourselves a thought that was focused on the no. And how could you switch that so that you don't forget your keys? What could you say to yourself instead? Yeah, like just simply put it in the positive. Remember the keys, remember the keys, remember the keys. And then you're more likely to remember it because you've told your mind what you want it to do, not what you don't want it to do. So why would it be different with meditation? Now, if you want to tell yourself, don't think thoughts, what's going to happen? You're going to start thinking thoughts. You're going to be thinking the thought that you shouldn't think thoughts. And you're going to get stuck on that thought. No, so you want to go beyond all concepts and conceptual thinking, and you want to be able to access the intuition, right? And so what do you do with this thinking mind? You want to escape from it? Well, you want to escape from it only because it's generating stress and discomfort for you. If it was generating bliss, would you want to escape from it? No. So if you direct your mind rather than trying to push it away and escape from it, it can generate bliss for you. No? And that's its real job. The highest, job your mind can do is to generate not just bliss, but waves, unending waves of bliss, because there's an infinite source of bliss inside of you. There's that golden Buddha we are looking to discover. No? And so that bliss, you have to direct your mind towards it. And directing the mind, contrary to, like I'm saying, some popular conceptions of meditation doesn't just mean being passive, letting go and not doing anything. Because then you're probably just going to float on the surface. And you might feel like you're not getting anywhere and wonder if you're really doing the right thing, and just have all these kinds of questions in your mind, or get impatient and feel like, I've got a lot of other things to do, and why am I sitting here? Yeah. But if you have a way to direct the mind, and direct it in such a way that it touches that bliss, and the mind starts generating these beautiful feelings inside, then it's a different story. Then meditation becomes a search. Meditation becomes interesting. And I'm not saying it's always interesting. There's days when you're tired and you're not focused, and whenever you have any type of discipline in your life, whether it's running and sports or some other type of discipline in your life, even art, there's days when you're on and you're off. We're never all the time going up. We're not all the time enthusiastic. Sometimes we have to push ourselves. Sometimes we have to mobilize ourselves. But you also know, like if you run, do any of you run or do a sport regularly? Few people, yeah. So like if you stop for a few days, then it gets easy to be lazy about it. No, you have to kind of like keep your momentum going, because when you stop, it's harder to start up again. But when you do it regularly, you see the benefits over time. It gives you a lot of benefits in your life. If you only do it now and then, it's a big struggle to do it. No, if you only go for a run once a year, you're going to have all kinds of pain in your body the next day. You're not going to feel very, and you're not going to be very satisfied with your performance level because, when I was a kid, I could run a lot faster. So anything has kind of got this cumulative benefit to it. So yeah, with meditation, that's why you see us bringing using mantra when we do meditation. Why do we use Bhavanam Kevalam? Bhavanam Kevalam gives a point of focus. It helps the mind to direct itself, but into a subtle direction. And a lot of people ask me, why Sanskrit? Why can't we just say love? Why can't we say something else? There's several technical reasons for that that have to do with acoustic resonance, and that there's certain aspects of Sanskrit, which could be a whole other discourse, but that help you on a vibrational level. But the other level of it is that it's even better, like even in Sanskrit, a lot of the words used for personal meditation, because the mantra used, Bhavanam Kevalam, is a general mantra, but the ones used for personal meditation are shorter, and they tend to be abstract syllables. Even if somebody was a Sanskrit speaker, a lot of times the mantras are not normal words. They're words that are only associated with your meditation practice, so that it's like an anchor, that helps you to anchor only into states of meditation, and it's not associated with other things. And so you can really use it effectively just to help you to go into meditation states. So that's a little bit about, when doing meditation, maybe it will help you to experiment with this idea of making your mind actively engaged in the process and actively directing it towards your essence. Knowing that your essence is an essence of bliss, light, love. And so if you are able to imagine it, if you're able to think about it and open your mind towards it, you will start to perceive it. And so I was thinking that on Saturday when we have the open space, I would like to propose doing a bit longer session of kirtan for people who are interested, because when you do it, not just 10 minutes, but when you do it, we change melodies, experience different melodies, then you start to let your mind go into a flow, and you go past the critical thinking intellectual mind, and the intuition starts to blossom, and you can get more into the sentiment behind the kirtan, and you can let your mind, it's just magic. I don't know. It's the easiest way to experience that there is bliss inside of you through singing and through experiencing kirtan on a little bit, deeper level. So I would invite you to do that, or if not when I'm here, probably Didi's organizing moments when we do longer kirtans. And it's a beautiful experience to try. None of this stuff is stuff you have to do. These are all invitations because they're just opportunities. You will never know. Meditation, it's not a set of beliefs. No, it's all stuff you can try. You experience it on your own skin and you decide, is it as they say or not? What is my experience of it? Just because I feel one thing or he feels one thing doesn't mean, you'll feel the same thing. What is your experience? What is in it for you? What can you discover? You'll never know unless you try. It's one of those things, you have to give it a fair chance, otherwise you will never know what gifts it could bring you or not bring you. But you have to experiment with it. So, when the mind becomes intoxicated with the thought of the infinite, then the finite mind transcends its own limits and loses itself in a state of endless peace. And this is the highest attainment. So this is how yoga defines, what is the goal of meditation. It's to go into that, it's the drop of water to enter into the ocean. It's to experience that unity that is available to us internally, and that gives tremendous inspiration and a tremendous expansion of heart and mind. No, it's the ultimate expansion or experience of freedom that we long for, and limitlessness when we direct it towards the spiritual level. I like this. If you make friends with yourself, you will never be alone. So the other part of the spiritual journey is, one of the first signs, I was reading this kind of technical text, philosophical text that dealt with, the awakening of the Kula Kundalini and the different chakras, and, what are the signs? And you expect some type of spectacular, colors, visions, something. No, it's very simple. The first sign of awakening of spirituality in the life of a person is when they have the realization that they're not alone. That you're not alone. That there is a force guiding you. That the universe is interacting with your very thoughts and your innermost desires. And that the answers come when you really hunger for them. And that magical experience, I think that really is the true magic of life. When you start tuning into that flow and feeling that support and that just amazing choreography that exists in the universe for you, especially for you, especially designed for your awakening personally. No? And that entity is thinking about each and every one of us at the center of the universe. It's just mind-blowing. It's amazing. It's hard to put in words. But part of your experience of not feeling alone is that you can interact. You can communicate. You can, when you have problems, you often think to yourself. You know there's a part of you that listens. Yeah? So cultivating that inner dialogue, that inner relationship, asking for help and guidance and just for, let me see you more. I want to feel something. Show me the way. These types of inner dialogues, inner questions, that really creates a spiritual flow, and sometimes even when technical things like meditation and practices are not so, going so well, you can still be activating this dialogue. And in fact, our master gave a whole set of songs, called Prabhat Sangeet, in which that relationship between, us and the Supreme goes through all kinds of, he just demonstrates all different types of emotions: frustration, disappointment, anger. Where did you go? You left me here all alone in the pouring rain. This was a rose garden and now there's only thorns. Where are you? So just showing you the vast variety of feelings that you can have, that you can express through that relationship. It's not only have to be very prayerful or in a certain etiquette, but your full experience of humanity, you can express it through developing this relationship to the spirit within. So that which makes the mind soft and so strong and strenuous as it may keep itself in a balanced state even in the condition of pain and creates a perpetually pleasant feeling within is called love. We sometimes think love is supposed to come from the outside. We look for love. It's often a big quest, for people to fall in love and to find their perfect partner. And usually after some time, the perfect partner doesn't seem so perfect anymore, and then you might think, well, maybe I'm not really in love anymore. And again, the search starts. But actually, love is something that it's real, where it really originates from is inside, and it flows through us. And we experience it through the giving more than the receiving. People can be trying to give us love, but if we're not open to it, we won't even feel it. We will feel nothing. But if we're engaging in love, if we're letting love flow through us, it's through the giving that we feel the love. And love has its source within, and so we can choose, to let it flow more and more through us. And then it becomes this type of love that makes our mind soft and strong at the same time, and that allows us to even go through difficulties with trust and with hope, rather than getting cynical and shut down by life's challenges. So this is from Rabindranath Tagore, a great Bengali poet. Clouds come floating into my life, no longer to carry rain or usher storm, but to add color to my sunset sky. So spirituality, having that spiritual dialogue, having that spiritual connection in your life, it doesn't mean you're going to be happy all the time. Nobody's going to be happy all the time. Things aren't always going to go your way. And in fact, a lot of times you might be tested with all kinds of, difficulties and obstacles. They're not bad. They help you to become stronger. But as you have a spiritual outlook, you change how you see those very same clouds. Instead of seeing them as threats that are going to come and rain and storm and destroy everything, you just see their beauty also. You see them in a different way. You can accept the clashes in your life in a different way, and that gives you resilience. Okay, so let's hear from you. Where do you get stuck? What are the obstacles to starting meditation or integrating it into your life or deepening it wherever you're at with meditation?
Perhaps a physical one. So like, talk about your own life. You may not have a space somewhere that you feel you can do it in privacy or something like that.
Wow, that's a really good point. I often tell in my meditation classes when I'm trying to encourage people to start a practice, I think, one very useful step is just to look at your space and physically create a little spot. And it doesn't have to be fancy. I mean, it could just be putting a yoga mat and a pillow somewhere, or it could be, putting a little table. Like I see it here, you've got all the little nice, enticing little spiritual spots. You create these little spots with shells and crystals on them, and that just look nice and peaceful. So yeah, creating a little and even putting a little aesthetic thought into it, it's helpful. It's not going to do it for you, but it's like if you want to go running and you don't even have the equipment, you don't have the right shoes, then you're going to have another excuse not to do running. Oh yeah, I want to run, but I need to go and buy those shoes. So if you have created that physical space, it also it creates sacred space literally in your life, because what it's about, integrating a practice into your life. What I was going to say that comes up, and just tell me if anybody resonates with this. Time.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I hear from people, I just don't have time. It sounds like a nice idea, but I just don't have time. There's no time in my life, right? We are so, full of things we have to do all the time, and I recognize that. That is really a very serious challenge in modern life. We really are. So much demands on our time. But even more, the reason why we need to create and, protect sacred space in our lives. We need to really fight for it, to clear out tiny little spaces of sacred, to allow that sacred energy into our lives. It's not going to happen on its own. Nobody's ever going to create the space for you. That space will only happen in your lives if you fight for it, if you make space and time for it, because there's just too much going on. If it's not a priority somehow that, yes, I'm willing to, it means letting go of a few things. It might mean making choices. Maybe you have a routine that to come home and relax, you turn on the TV for a bit. So we have time for certain things. We find time to do things that we consider relaxing, or that we, that are important to us, to spend time with our children, and to spend time with our families, to maybe do things like watch TV or go out, with friends into the city. And we make time for things like that. But how much time do we really make for our spirit? Where is its place in your life? Do you give space for yourself? Nobody will give it to you. I'm so sorry. I wish I could give it to you, and create you the space. But other than, the fact that your school creates a little bit of space for doing quiet times with the kids, but it's really hard to feel something in quiet time if you're not, you don't have a base, when you don't have a bunch of kids in your mind, just for you, because then you're kind of in charge of, making an environment for them. It's not just for you. So I encourage you to give that gift to yourself.
You're right on time.
How
Talking
many?
about no time, you're on time.
I'm on time. I still have time. Let's see, 12 minutes. Yeah, so that's one of the obstacles. Where's this one? Remembering that, sometimes expectations get in the way, in the sense that we sit down to meditate and we're disappointed we don't have these, we hear people talk about nice, blissful experiences, we hear them talk about peace and all these things. We sit down and we feel like, oh my God, there's so much going on in my mind. I must not be really cut out for meditation. In fact, it can even make us feel more, aware of how much stress we have, because we sit and we see our mind, going off in its circles and being involved in its stresses and so forth. So just remember, have realistic expectations of yourself. Don't expect, that meditation is going to be spectacular. It doesn't have to be spectacular to be effective. You might not have any spectacular experiences, but it might still help you to allow, by allowing that sacred space into your life, by clearing it out, by emptying your cup instead of filling it up all the time, you might find that certain qualities start to bloom more easily in your life versus when you didn't have that space. So, if you were to see a big piano like this and you've never taken piano lessons, you wouldn't expect yourself to sit down and start playing, Mozart and all this fancy music. You would understand that it's obvious that you would need to do really simple stuff and to practice and to get good at it, and that in time you would get mastery and you'd be able to sing whatever you like on the piano, right? So it's the same meditation. Just because you've had a mind your whole life doesn't mean that you know how to use it for meditation. It didn't come with an instruction manual. And just like with the piano, it really helps, the same idea we're talking in the morning, zone of proximal development, if you've got guidance, if you've got somebody to help you, if you don't have to do it all on your own. And it really, really helps to have, that's where the roles of the gurus, the enlightened masters and teachers comes in, because it's a lot better to do something with somebody who's already at the level you want to attain than to try and mess around on your own, because if you just sit down at the piano and try to mess around on your own, it's going to take you a lot longer. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to take you a lot longer to achieve a level of true mastery of the instrument. So that's another aspect that helps to understand. And there's fears, a lot of just different fears of, let's look at, I love this poem. I first heard of this, I thought that it was Nelson Mandela used it during his inaugural speech in South Africa. It's very powerful. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure with you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. Yeah. So, a lot of times there's a fear like, oh, if I do spiritual, if I do meditation, maybe I'd have to give up a lot of things I like, a lot of pleasures and things like this. Maybe better not to deal with it. But that just underestimates how much deeper pleasures. Yeah, you might see people do things, maybe even they change their diet or different things, but because the meditation is a much greater pleasure, and so those other things just fall away naturally if they're meant to, and it's not necessary. The most important thing is to just create that connection and see what it does for you, and everything else is secondary. And to have that courage to embrace your light, to live from your light, to shine like children do.
Got a couple of minutes, Didi.
Okay, I'm almost there.
Great.
Oh, there was more to the poem, sorry. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not in just some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. From Marianne Williamson.
Except it wasn't.
Yeah, Marion Williamson wrote it. No, it was the.
Does anybody like reading Rumi? I
Who
like
doesn't
Rumi.
like Rumi? Gotta make room
Okay.
for Rumi.
All right, I really like this poem. These spiritual window shoppers who idly ask, how much is that? Oh, I'm just looking. They handle 100 items and put them down, shadows with no capital. What is spent is love, and 2 eyes wet with weeping. But these walk into a shop, and their whole lives pass suddenly in that moment, in that shop. Where did you go? Nowhere. What did you have to eat? Nothing much. Even if you don't know what you want, buy something to be part of the exchanging flow. Start a huge, foolish project like Noah. It makes absolutely no difference what people think of you. I love the association with Noah, because just what crazier project, than this guy building this crazy ark with all these, to save the world, to save the animals. 1 minute left. And we're trying to do something, make the world a better place. It's a big idealistic dream, but it doesn't matter what people think of you. Don't sit on the fence. Don't just be a window shopper. Buy something. Be part of the exchanging flow. Go into something. Really experience it. And seek support. Seek personal guidance. No, not just internet, not just books. It's really something completely different when you have somebody you can talk with you and guide. And here in the River School, you have a really special opportunity, which you can choose to take. You have acharyas that are here, that come through, that are associated with the school, and they are there for you. They're there, that's our role. Our role is to give individual guidance for people on the spiritual level. And human beings are social beings, We are very much, the path of spirituality is one that you ultimately walk alone, but you don't have to walk it just alone. There can be other people walking side by side with you. Now, and having that type of spiritual sisterhood and brotherhood is so, so, so important, especially in these days when there's so many obstacles, you know? And, you know, when it doesn't, even those of you who have been practicing for a long time, remembering that you can go and, you know, ask for, you know, specific questions, or not just about your meditation specifically. You can ask, maybe you have a health problem or other types of obstacles going on in your life, things going on in relationships, those types of things. If you want to get a spiritual perspective on it, use the opportunity. I'd like to encourage you during this period when you're all here together and you've carved out some sacred space and time for your own development, to make time to set up appointments with Didi and with the acharyas, you know, and have, I think, Maleny, is she here at the moment? Yeah, I asked her if she could make because we do this in Holland. When I go there in Holland, we remind teachers of this opportunity, and we set up, you know, we have a room where you can do these meetings, and there's a schedule. So just in the spaces in between programs and stuff and also on Saturday to use that time to get some help, you know, to get some encouragement, to ask questions that you don't have to ask in the group, to get individualized guidance. That's the really authentic spiritual way of developing, is to have it happen in relationship, not necessarily all by yourself or just with the internet or whatever. And the other big support for your practice is to create community around it. You know, to not feel that you have to do it in isolation, because we're social creatures, and we can use that to our advantage also for our spiritual practice. Like, the more that we can do things and create a sense of community and a sense of flow, when you do meditation together in a group, it creates a much bigger energy than when you do it by yourself. And it gives you an impulse that helps your own practice, whether you've been doing it for, you know, 40 years or for 4 weeks or 4 days. It makes a big, big difference. And I've seen in Holland, there's been moments also when the teachers get inspired, you know, during trainings, and then they go and they set up, you know, spaces and times for them to support each other, maybe in smaller groups, you know, maybe at people's homes, maybe in the space of the school, but thinking about that. How can you create community here for yourselves to support that inner part of your development as a teacher, so that you have more juice, you have more, you know, more to bring, more to offer into the work that you do. The last thing was just, I forgot to put them to do the journal exercises. I'm sorry, I felt the time pressure.
Yes.
But I just want to say, the last thing, just take one moment now to breathe deeply and really set an intention, because an intention gives you a focus and it helps you to get where you want to go. I want you to all just connect with the fact that you're a spiritual being and that you have this vast potential in you. You might not know it yet, you might not be able to feel it yet, but just know that it's there. And I want you to just think, what can you do in the next 3 days for yourself, for your spirit, to get to deepen that relationship? What intention do you want to set about how you can use the next couple days to support that? And when you've got a clear picture, then you can just write it down for yourself.